Maggie Colton pressed her father's rifle against the chest of the man who had come to take everything she had left. Her hands did not shake. Behind him, 3 more riders waited in the scorching summer heat, and beyond them, the burned skeleton of her barn still smoked against the Texas sky. "You got till sundown," the man said. "Judge Creevy's orders." "Tell your judge," Maggie answered, "that Colton land stays Colton land." What happened next would bring a stranger out of the shadows and ignite a war that this town would never forget. If you want to see how one woman's courage changed everything, subscribe to our channel now and follow this story to the very end. Drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from so we can see how far this story has traveled. The rifle barrel pressed hard against Tobias Lang's chest, and for the first time in years, he saw something in a woman's eyes that made him hesitate. Maggie Colton stood on her porch with her boots planted firm, her chestnut hair falling loose from its braid, and her finger resting steady on the trigger. "I ain't gonna ask you again," she said. "Get off my land." Tobias held up one hand, slow and easy, but the smirk never left his face. "Now, Miss Colton, there ain't no need for all this. Judge Creevy just wants to talk, neighborly-like. The judge burned my barn last night." Maggie's voice dropped lower. "That ain't neighborly. Can't prove that, ma'am. Don't need to prove it." She stepped forward and the rifle pushed harder. "I know, you know, and when I find the evidence, the whole territory's gonna know." Behind Tobias, the 3 riders shifted in their saddles. The summer sun beat down merciless, and sweat rolled down their faces. One of them reached toward his holster, but Tobias raised his hand quick without turning around. "Easy, boys. The lady's just upset." He looked back at Maggie with eyes that carried no warmth. "Your daddy owed the judge money, signed papers before he passed. That makes this land Creevy property now legal and proper. My daddy never signed nothing. Got his mark right there on the deed. My daddy could write his full name in perfect letters." Maggie's jaw tightened. "He taught me to read before I could walk. So you can take that forged paper and tell your judge to choke on it." Tobias clicked his tongue soft. "That's harsh words, Miss Colton. Harsh words for a woman standing alone against the most powerful man in Brazos Bend." "I ain't alone. Cool." "No." He looked around deliberate, taking in the empty land, the burned barn, the single horse in the corral. "Don't see nobody standing with you. Don't see nobody bringing you supplies neither. Heard the general store turned you away this morning. Heard the feed shop won't sell you grain. Heard even the preacher crossed the street when he saw you coming." Maggie said nothing, but her grip on the rifle tightened. 30 days. Tobias continued. "That's what the judge is giving you. 30 days to clear out peaceful, and he'll even let you keep that horse and whatever you can carry. That's generous, considering." "Considering what?" "Considering what happens to folks who don't take the judge's generous offers." The threat hung in the air between them. Maggie felt her heart beating hard beneath her ribs, but she did not let him see. She had learned young that men like Tobias fed on fear, and she would starve him before she gave him a single bite. "You tell Judge Creevy," she said slow, "that I will be here in 30 days, and 60, and 100. I will be here when he's in the ground, and I will dance on his grave." Something flickered in Tobias's eyes. Respect, maybe, or recognition. He tipped his hat once and stepped back careful. 30 days, Miss Colton. After that, things get ugly." He turned and mounted his horse, and the 4 riders headed back toward town without another word. Maggie watched until they disappeared over the ridge, then lowered the rifle slow. Her hands began to shake now that no one could see. She sat down hard on the porch steps and pressed her palms against her face. The smell of smoke still drifted from the ruins of the barn, and somewhere in the distance, a hawk screamed across the empty sky. 3 months ago, her father had still been alive. 3 months ago, she had sat beside his bed, holding his rough hand while he struggled to breathe. He had looked at her with eyes full of sorrow and said the words she still heard every night in her dreams. "Should have sent for you sooner, Maggie girl. Should have told you I was sick. Hush now, Pa. Save your strength. Ain't got no strength left to save. He had coughed then deep and wet. Listen to me. The land. Whatever happens, you hold on to this land. Your mama's buried here. My whole life is in this dirt. Promise me. I promise, Pa. And the judge. His grip had tightened with surprising force. Don't trust him. Don't never trust him. He's been circling this property for years, waiting for me to weaken. Whatever paper he shows you, it's a lie. I never sold nothing. I never signed nothing. You hear me? I hear you. He had died that night quiet and peaceful, with her hand still holding his. And 3 days later, Judge Harlan Creevy had shown up at her door with a deed that bore her father's mark, and a smile that never reached his eyes. Maggie wiped her face and stood up straight. Crying would not save the ranch. Self-pity would not bring her father back. She walked to the well and drew up a bucket of water, drinking deep before pouring the rest over her head. The cold shocked her system awake, and she pushed the wet hair back from her face with both hands. She needed supplies. Food would run out in 2 days, maybe 3 if she stretched it thin. The nearest town was Brazos Bend, and every door there had closed against her. The next town was 40 miles through rough country, and her single horse was already worn thin. But there was no other choice. Maggie saddled the mare and rode out before the sun reached its peak. The road to town passed through land that had once belonged to small ranchers like her father families who had worked the earth for generations. Now most of those families were gone, bought out, or driven out by Judge Creevy's relentless hunger for more. She reached Brazos Bend as the afternoon heat pressed down heavy on the wooden buildings. The main street stretched quiet, too quiet for a trading day. Folks who had known her since childhood turned away when she passed. A woman she had once called friend pulled her children inside and shut the door. Maggie tied her horse outside the general store and stepped up onto the boardwalk. Through the window, she could see Mr. Harmon arranging goods on the shelves. She pushed open the door, and the bell above it rang sharp. Harmon looked up, and his face went pale. "Miss Colton." He glanced toward the back room. "You shouldn't be here." "I need supplies, Mr. Harmon. Flour, beans, coffee, whatever you can spare." "I can't." He shook his head quick. "I'm sorry, I truly am, but I can't sell to you." "My money's good." "It ain't about the money." He lowered his voice. The judge made it clear. "Anyone who helps you answers to him. I got a family, Miss Colton. I got 3 daughters." Maggie felt the anger rise hot in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. "And what about my family? My daddy worked this land for 30 years. He bought his supplies from this store every month, never missed a payment, never asked for credit." I know all that." Harmon looked miserable. "But your daddy's gone now. God rest him, and the judge says that land is his. Fighting him won't change nothing except getting more people hurt. So that's it. Everyone just bows down to Harlan Creevy because they're scared. Because we're sensible." Harmon's voice hardened just a little. "You should be too. Take his offer. Leave peaceful. Start over somewhere else." Maggie stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked out without another word. The door slammed behind her hard enough to rattle the window glass. She stood on the boardwalk, breathing slow to keep the tears from falling. The sun beat down merciless, and her empty stomach twisted with hunger. All around her the town went about its business, pretending she did not exist. That was when she noticed him. Across the street beside the blacksmith shop, a tall man stood watching her. He leaned against the wooden post with his arms crossed, his black hair falling past his collar, and his gray eyes fixed on her with an expression she could not read. A scar ran down his left forearm, visible where his sleeves were rolled up against the heat. Maggie had never seen him before. Strangers were rare in Brazos Bend, and this one looked like trouble in the way that dust storms and rattlesnakes looked like trouble, dangerous but not necessarily meaning harm. She looked away and untied her horse. There was nothing for her here. She would have to ride to Miller's Crossing and hope that Creevy's reach did not extend that far. "They won't help you there neither." The voice came from right behind her, and Maggie spun around fast. The stranger had crossed the street quiet as a shadow, and now he stood close enough that she could see the lines around his eyes, the weariness that sat deep in his bones. "Excuse me. Miller's Crossing." He nodded toward the road. "You're thinking of riding there for supplies. Won't do no good. Creevy owns the bank there, and the bank owns most of the businesses. Word travels fast when a man has money." Maggie's hand moved toward the knife at her belt, slow but deliberate. "You seem to know a lot about my business, mister." "Don't know nothing about your business," he shrugged. "But I got ears and this town talks loud. Heard about the barn burning, heard about the 30 days, heard about the deed that's probably worth less than the paper it's printed on. If you're working for Creevy, I don't work for nobody but myself." Something flickered in those gray eyes, something that looked almost like pain. "Name's Caleb Hensley. I'm the blacksmith here least, until I move on to the next town." "Then what do you want?" Caleb looked at her for a long moment, and Maggie had the strange feeling that he was seeing someone else, someone from long ago who had worn the same desperate determination on her face. "I got a storeroom behind the smithy," he said finally. "Flour beans, some dried meat. Enough to keep one person eating for a couple of weeks if they're careful." Maggie's eyes narrowed. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." "No, I don't." He looked away toward the burned outline of the hills in the distance. "But I know what it looks like when a whole town turns against someone who ain't done nothing wrong. And I know what it feels like to stand by and do nothing while that happens. I didn't ask for charity. Ain't offering charity." Caleb met her eyes again. "I'm offering a trade. You got a ranch that needs fixing up, and I ain't seen nothing but forge work for 3 months straight. Let me help repair your property. In exchange, you let me stable my horse on your land and sleep in whatever's left of your barn." "There ain't nothing left of my barn." "Then I'll sleep under the stars. Done it before." Maggie studied him, searching for the trap. Men did not offer help without wanting something, and the last man who had offered her kindness had taken her heart and crushed it in his fist. But there was something in Caleb Hensley's face that held no guile, no hidden hunger. Just weariness, and something else she could not name. "Why?" she asked again. The truth this time. Caleb was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of years. "Because 10 years ago, someone needed my help, and I didn't give it. I followed orders instead of following my gut, and she died because of it." He paused. "I ain't looking for redemption, Miss Colton. Ain't no redemption for what I done, but maybe I'm tired of being the man who stands by and watches." Maggie felt something shift inside her chest, a crack in the wall she had built around her heart. This man was not lying. Whatever his sins were, he wore them plain on his face for anyone who cared to look. "If Creevy finds out you helped me, he'll make your life hell. Reckon he'll try. He's burned down buildings before, run people out of town. Some folks say worse." "I've seen worse." Caleb's jaw tightened. "And I'm done running from it." Maggie considered him for a long moment. She had 2 choices: send him away and face the next 30 days alone, starving and friendless, or accept help from a stranger and risk whatever trap might spring from it. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Don't trust nobody, Maggie girl. But listen to your gut. Your gut won't never steer you wrong." She looked into Caleb Hensley's gray eyes and made her decision. "You can stable your horse in the old chicken coop for now. Roof still holds. But if you're lying to me, if you're working some angle for Creevy or anybody else, I will put a bullet in you myself." "Fair enough. And don't expect conversation. I ain't in the mood for talking." "I ain't much for talking neither." Maggie swung up onto her horse and looked down at him. "You coming or not?" Caleb untied his own horse from the post nearby and mounted up. Together they rode out of Brazos Bend, past the watching eyes and the whispered words toward the ranch that one woman refused to surrender. Behind them, in the shadow of the bank building, Judge Harlan Creevy stood at his window and watched them go. His face betrayed nothing, but his fingers drummed slow against the glass. "Tobias," he said without turning around. Tobias Lang stepped forward from the corner of the room. "Sir, find out everything there is to know about the blacksmith. Where he came from. Why he left. Every secret he's ever buried." "Yes, sir." "And Tobias." Creevy finally turned, and his eyes were cold as a winter grave. "If he's got weaknesses, I want to know them. Every man has a breaking point. Every man has something he fears losing more than his life. And if he don't break—" Creevy smiled, then a smile that held no warmth at all. "Then we break him anyway, and we make sure the Colton girl watches every moment of it." The sun was setting over Brazos Bend, painting the sky with shades of blood and gold. And somewhere on the road north, two strangers rode toward a reckoning that neither of them could see coming. The ride back to the ranch passed in silence. Maggie did not look at the man beside her, and Caleb did not push for conversation. When they reached the property, she pointed toward the chicken coop. Without a word, then disappeared inside the house and shut the door hard behind her. Caleb unsaddled both horses and led them to water. He worked slow and steady, checking the fences, testing the well pump, walking the perimeter of the burned barn. The damage was bad, but not beyond saving. The frame still stood, and most of the tools had survived in a stone shed nearby. He did not knock on her door that night. He spread his bedroll in the chicken coop, cleaned out the worst of the mess, and slept lighter than he had in years. Morning came hot and early. Caleb was already hauling lumber from the shed when Maggie stepped onto the porch with 2 cups of coffee. She stood there, watching him work, her face giving nothing away. "You're still here," she said finally. "Told you I would be." Lots of men say things they don't mean. Caleb straightened up and wiped the sweat from his forehead. "I ain't lots of men." Maggie walked down the steps and held out one of the cups. He took it with a nod, and for a moment they stood there in the growing heat, drinking coffee and not speaking. It was not comfortable exactly, but it was not hostile neither. "I'm gonna need help with the framing," Caleb said. "Can't raise beams alone?" "I can lift." "I don't doubt it." They worked through the morning without rest. Maggie was stronger than she looked, and she did not complain when the wood scraped her palms or the sun burned her neck. Caleb found himself watching her when she was not looking, seeing the way she attacked every task like it was personal. "Your daddy teach you to work like this?" he asked during a brief pause. "My daddy taught me everything." Her voice carried an edge. "How to ride, how to shoot, how to keep books," said a woman who couldn't take care of herself was a woman waiting to be taken advantage of. Smart man. He was. Maggie's jaw tightened. Too smart to sign any paper giving his land away. Caleb nodded slow. "You got proof the deed is forged?" "Not yet. But I will." "How?" Maggie looked at him for a long moment, weighing whether to trust him with more. Then she walked to the house and returned with a small wooden box. Inside were letters, documents, and a leather journal filled with her father's handwriting. "My daddy kept records of everything," she said. "Every transaction, every conversation, every dealing with Creevy going back 15 years. If there's proof the judge has been stealing land, it's in here somewhere." Caleb took the journal careful and flipped through the pages. The handwriting was clear and precise. Nothing like the shaky mark on the forged deed. "This is good," he said, "but it ain't enough. You need someone who can verify the signature, someone official. The only judge in 3 counties is Harlan Creevy. What about a federal marshal?" Maggie laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Nearest marshal is 200 miles away, and Creevy's got friends in the territorial government. Any complaint I file will disappear before it reaches the right desk. Then we find another way." "We." Maggie's eyes narrowed. "There ain't no we, Mr. Hensley. You're here to work off your debt and stable your horse. That's all." Caleb held her gaze steady. "That's all you want it to be, Miss Colton. But I reckon we both know this thing is bigger than one woman and one ranch." Before Maggie could answer, the sound of hoofbeats reached them from the road. 3 riders appeared over the ridge, moving fast. Maggie's hand went to the rifle leaning against the porch rail, but Caleb caught her arm. "Wait. Let go of me. Just wait." He squinted at the approaching figures. "That ain't Creevy's men. Look at the horses." The riders came closer, and Maggie recognized the worn-out mare in front. It belonged to Nettie Parsons, from the boarding house in town. Behind her rode Pastor Jeremiah Oakes and a young man Maggie did not know. Nettie pulled up hard in front of the house, breathing heavy. Her gray hair had come loose from its pins, and her face carried an urgency that made Maggie's stomach drop. "You need to hide," Nettie said without greeting. "Both of you, right now." "What's happening?" "Creevy's coming. He's got 6 men with him, and they ain't coming to talk." Nettie glanced back toward the road. "Tobias found something about your blacksmith friend here. Something from his past. The judge is using it." Caleb's face went still. "What did he find?" "I don't know the details, but I heard him telling the judge that you used to be a lawman somewhere up north. That something bad happened, and you've been running ever since." The silence stretched tight between them. Maggie looked at Caleb with new eyes, seeing the weight he carried differently now. "Is it true?" she asked. "Part of it." "Which part?" Caleb's jaw worked, and when he spoke his voice was rough. "I was a deputy sheriff in a town called Cedar Falls. 10 years ago we had a hostage situation. I was ordered to hold position and wait for backup. I followed orders. Backup came too late. People died. People, my wife." The words fell heavy as stones. "My wife died because I did what I was told, instead of what I knew was right." Maggie stared at him, and something shifted in her chest. Not pity, understanding. She knew what it meant to carry guilt that never lifted. "That ain't your fault," she said quiet. "I had a choice. I made the wrong one. That makes it my fault." Caleb turned to Nettie. "How's Creevy planning to use this?" "He's telling folks you're dangerous, that you got a history of letting innocent people die, that he's coming out here to arrest you for your own protection and to save Miss Colton from a wanted man." "I ain't wanted. Don't matter what's true, matters what people believe." Nettie wrung her hands. "Half the town already thinks you're some kind of outlaw. The other half is too scared to argue." Pastor Oakes finally spoke, his voice trembling. "I came to warn you, Miss Colton. The judge is planning something. I don't know what exactly, but he's been meeting with men I don't recognize, strangers from out of town." "Why are you helping me?" Maggie asked. "Last I heard you crossed the street to avoid me." The pastor's face flushed with shame. "I did. God forgive me, I did. But last night I prayed for guidance, and the Lord reminded me that silence in the face of evil is its own kind of sin." "Pretty words," Maggie said. "But words won't stop bullets." "No." The pastor straightened his shoulders. "But witnesses might slow them down. If Creevy kills you in front of a man of God, he'll have to answer for it." "You willing to die for that principle?" "I don't know." He met her eyes, honest. "But I'm willing to stand here and find out." The young man with them stepped forward. He was maybe 20, with a farmer's build and nervous hands. "Name's Thomas Whitley, ma'am. My family had a ranch 2 valleys over. The judge took it 3 years ago, same way he's trying to take yours. My daddy fought him, and one night he just disappeared. Never found the body." Maggie's blood ran cold. "You think Creevy killed him?" "I know he did. Can't prove it, but I know." Thomas's voice cracked. "I've been working at the feed store since, keeping my head down, waiting for a chance to make things right. When I heard you were fighting back, I figured maybe this was it." Nettie pulled a burlap sack from her saddlebag and handed it to Maggie. "Flour beans, salt pork. Ain't much, but it's what I could sneak out without the judge's people noticing." "You're risking everything bringing this to me." "I know what I'm risking." Nettie's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "I also know what happens when good people do nothing. This town used to mean something before Creevy took over. Maybe it can mean something again. The sound of distant hoofbeats cut through the moment. Everyone turned toward the road, and fear rippled through the group. "Too late to hide now," Caleb said. He reached for his gun belt and strapped it on with practiced hands. "Miss Colton, you should get inside." "Like hell I will." "This ain't your fight. This is my land. That makes it my fight." Maggie grabbed her rifle and checked the chamber. "You want to help? Then stand beside me, not in front of me." Caleb looked at her for a moment, and something passed between them that neither could name. Then he nodded once and moved to her left, leaving her the position of authority on her own porch. Judge Harlan Creevy rode at the head of 6 men, including Tobias Lang. He was a tall man, still strong despite his years, with silver hair and a face that showed nothing but calm confidence. His suit was fine, his horse was finer, and he carried himself like a king surveying his kingdom. He pulled up at the edge of the property and took in the scene with raised eyebrows. The burned barn, the 2 defenders on the porch, the unlikely gathering of townspeople behind them. "Well, well." His voice carried easy across the distance. "Quite the welcoming party, Miss Colton. Though I'm surprised to see the good pastor and Mrs. Parsons among your guests. They're usually more sensible." "We're here as witnesses," Pastor Oakes said, his voice steadier than before. "Whatever happens here today will be known." How dramatic. Creevy dismounted smooth and walked forward with his hands open and empty. "I'm not here for violence, Pastor. I'm here to prevent it." He looked at Caleb with cold eyes. "Mr. Hensley, I've learned some troubling things about your past. Things that suggest Miss Colton may be in danger." "She ain't in danger from me." "No, you were a deputy in Cedar Falls, Wyoming. During your watch, 4 people died, including your own wife. You abandoned your post afterward and been drifting ever since. Some might call that cowardice. Others might call it guilt." Caleb's face went pale, but his voice stayed level. "I answered for what happened in Cedar Falls. No charges were filed. I did my time in hell, and I don't answer to you." "Perhaps not." Creevy smiled thin. "But the people of Brazos Bend might want to know they've got a man with blood on his hands living among them. A man who let innocents die because he lacked the courage to act." "That ain't what happened." "Isn't it?" Creevy turned to address the small group. "Ladies, gentlemen, I'm not the villain here. I'm trying to protect this community from dangerous elements. Miss Colton's father owed me a legal debt, which makes her residence here trespassing. And now she's harboring a man with a history of failure that cost lives." "You're a liar." Thomas Whitley stepped forward, his hands shaking. "You killed my father. You took our land. You've been stealing from this whole territory for years." Creevy's smile never wavered. "That's a serious accusation, young man. One that could have consequences. I ain't scared of you no more." "You should be." Creevy's voice dropped low. "Your father wasn't scared neither. Look where that got him." The admission hung in the air, naked and ugly. Creevy did not seem to realize what he had just revealed, or perhaps he simply did not care. "That sounded like a confession to me," Maggie said. "Pastor, you heard that." "I heard it." "So did I," Nettie added. Creevy's smile finally cracked at the edges. "You're all hearing what you want to hear, the ramblings of a grieving boy and the desperation of a woman about to lose everything." He straightened his jacket. 25 days, Miss Colton. That's what you have left. I suggest you use them to pack. And I suggest you get off my land before I put a hole in that fancy suit." For a moment, something flickered in Creevy's eyes. Not fear exactly. Calculation. He was reassessing, measuring the resistance he had not expected to find. "Tobias," he said without turning, "make a note. Mrs. Parsons and Pastor Oakes are no longer welcome at any establishment in Brazos Bend. Mr. Whitley is terminated from his position effective immediately. Anyone who provides aid or comfort to Miss Colton will face similar consequences." "You can't do that," Nettie said. "I just did." Creevy mounted his horse and looked down at them with contempt. You want to play heroes, fine, but heroes need to eat, and heroes need shelter, and heroes need friends. How long do you think your little rebellion will last when every door in 50 miles slams shut in your faces? He turned his horse and rode away, his men following close behind. Only Tobias lingered for a moment, his eyes fixed on Caleb with something that looked almost like warning. Then he too was gone. The silence stretched long after the hoofbeats faded. Thomas Whitley sat down hard in the dirt, his brief courage draining out of him. Nettie put a hand on his shoulder. "What do we do now?" the young man asked. Maggie looked at the small group of people who had risked everything to stand with her. A widow, a preacher, a grieving son, and a stranger carrying wounds she was only beginning to understand. "Now we fight," she said. "Not with guns, not yet. We fight with truth." "How?" Pastor Oakes asked. Caleb stepped forward, his voice rough but certain. "The journal. Miss Colton's daddy kept records going back years. Every dirty deal, every questionable transaction, every person Creevy stepped on to get where he is. We go through that journal page by page, and we find every family he's wronged, every witness he's silenced, every secret he's buried." "That could take weeks," Nettie said. "We got 25 days. Maggie looked at Caleb with new eyes. He was not trying to save her. He was trying to help her save herself. That was different. That was something she could accept. "Nettie, you know this town better than anyone," Maggie said. "You know who's been hurt by Creevy, who might be willing to talk if they had protection." "I know a few." "Start making a list. Pastor, you've heard confessions. You've sat with dying men. Some of them must have whispered things about the judge." Oakes hesitated. "Those conversations are sacred. More sacred than the lives Creevy's destroyed." The pastor struggled with himself, and Maggie saw the moment his faith bent toward justice instead of protocol. "There's a man named Silas Wheeler, lives out past the creek. He used to be Creevy's bookkeeper before the judge pushed him out. If anyone knows where the bodies are buried, it's him." "Then that's where we start." Thomas Whitley stood up slow, his face still pale. "I can ride. I know the territory. Whatever you need delivered, or whoever you need found, I can do it." Maggie felt something stir in her chest. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of it. "First things first," Caleb said. "We need to fortify this place. Creevy ain't gonna wait 25 days to make his next move. He'll test us, push us, try to break us before the deadline." "How do you know?" "Because that's what I'd do." His gray eyes met hers. "And because men like Creevy don't give deadlines unless they're planning something for before the clock runs out." The group worked through the afternoon, dividing tasks and sharing what little they had. Nettie rode back to town to gather information, moving careful and quiet. Pastor Oakes went to find Silas Wheeler. Thomas stayed to help with the physical labor, his young muscles grateful for work that kept his mind off his father. Maggie and Caleb worked side by side, falling into a rhythm that neither of them expected. When their hands touched, reaching for the same tool, she did not pull away as quick as she might have the day before. "You didn't have to tell them about Cedar Falls," she said during a brief rest. "They were going to find out anyway. Better from me than from Creevy's mouth." "Does it help talking about it?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "No, but hiding from it ain't helped neither." Maggie understood that better than she wanted to admit. She had been hiding from her own guilt since her father died, burying it under work and anger and the constant push to survive. "I wasn't there when he passed," she said suddenly. "My daddy. I was living in St. Louis, working as a teacher for a family that didn't deserve me. He wrote letters saying he was fine, and I believed them because believing them was easier than coming home. You came back. Too late. Always too late." Her voice cracked. "He died holding my hand, but he spent his last months alone. That's on me. That'll always be on me." Caleb did not offer comfort or platitudes. He just nodded, one damaged soul recognizing another. "Maybe that's why we're here," he said finally. "Both of us. Maybe we got something to prove to the ghosts we carry. I don't believe in destiny. Neither do I, but I believe in choices." He looked at her direct. "You could have run. You didn't. That means something." Before she could answer, a shout came from the road. Thomas was running toward them, his face white with panic. "Riders coming! Different direction this time, from the west!" Maggie grabbed her rifle and ran to the rise. She counted 5 horses moving fast, kicking up dust in the summer heat. These were not Creevy's men. The horses were wrong, and the riders moved like soldiers, not hired guns. "Who are they?" Caleb asked, coming up beside her. "I don't know." The lead rider pulled up at the edge of the property and raised his hands to show he was unarmed. He was an older man, maybe 60, with a weathered face and a U.S. Marshal's badge catching the afternoon sun. "Margaret Colton," he called out. Maggie lowered her rifle just a fraction. "Who's asking?" "Marshal Henry Dawson, Western District." He dismounted, slow and careful. "Got a letter 3 weeks back about land fraud in Brazos Bend. Took me this long to get here, but I'm here now." Maggie's heart slammed against her ribs. "I never sent any letter." "No, ma'am." The marshal pulled a folded paper from his pocket. Letter came from a man named William Colton. Said if anything happened to him, I should come and make sure his daughter got justice. The world tilted beneath Maggie's feet. Her father. Her father had written to a federal marshal before he died. He had known something was coming. He had tried to protect her even from the grave. She reached for the letter with trembling hands, and when she saw her father's handwriting, the tears she had been holding back finally broke free. "Miss Colton," the marshal said, gentle, "I think you and I have a lot to talk about." Maggie's hands shook as she unfolded her father's letter. The handwriting blurred through her tears, but she forced herself to read every word. Caleb stood close, not touching her, just present. "What does it say?" Thomas asked. Maggie wiped her face with the back of her hand and read aloud. "To Marshal Dawson. My name is William Colton. By the time you receive this, I may already be dead. Judge Harlan Creevy has been stealing land in Brazos Bend for 15 years. I have proof. Documents. Witnesses. Names of men who disappeared after refusing to sell. If something happens to me, please protect my daughter Margaret and ensure that justice finds its way to this territory. Signed, William Colton, April 1879. The marshal nodded slow. Letter reached my office about 3 weeks after the postmark. Your daddy mailed it knowing he was running out of time. He never told me. Maggie's voice broke. He never said nothing about being in danger. Probably didn't want to scare you. Or maybe he figured if you didn't know you'd be safer. Dawson looked toward the burned barn. Seems like he was wrong about that second part. Caleb stepped forward. Marshal Judge Creevy controls everything in 50 miles. Courts, banks, law enforcement. How do you plan to go up against that? Federal authority trumps local Mr. Dawson waited. Hensley, Caleb Hensley. Something flickered in the marshal's eyes. The Cedar Falls deputy? Caleb's jaw tightened. That was a long time ago. Not so long that people forgot. Dawson studied him careful. I knew Sheriff Morrison. He told me what really happened that night. Said you got blamed for a failure that started way above your head. Don't matter who gets blamed. People still died. They did. But you weren't the one who caused it. The marshal turned back to Maggie. Miss Colton, I need to see everything your daddy collected. Every document, every name, every piece of evidence. If it's as solid as his letter suggests, I can have Creevy in chains before the month is out. The journal's inside. I'll get it. Maggie walked to the house, her mind spinning. Her father had been fighting this battle long before she came home. He had been preparing, gathering evidence, building a case, and he had died before he could finish it. She returned with the wooden box and handed it to the marshal. He opened it careful and began examining the contents, his face growing darker with every page. "Lord Almighty," he muttered. "This goes back years. Land transfers with forged signatures. Loans paid off that somehow still show as owed. Death certificates signed before people actually died." He looked up sharp. "Your daddy was sitting on enough evidence to hang Creevy twice over. Then why didn't he use it? My guess, he was waiting for someone like me. Someone outside Creevy's reach." Dawson closed the box. "I'm going to need a few days to verify all this. Interview witnesses, compare documents. But if even half of this holds up, Harlan Creevy is finished." The word hung in the air like a promise. Finished. After all the suffering, all the stolen land, all the disappeared families. Finished. But Caleb did not look relieved. He was watching the horizon with worried eyes. "Marshal, with respect, Creevy ain't gonna wait for you to build a case. The minute he finds out you're here, he'll move fast, destroy evidence, silence witnesses, maybe worse. That's why I brought deputies." Dawson gestured toward his 4 men. "And that's why we're gonna move quiet. As far as anyone in town knows, I'm just a traveler passing through. Creevy's got eyes everywhere. Then we better work fast." The marshal looked at Maggie. "Is there somewhere safe we can set up? Somewhere away from the main roads?" "There's an old line shack about 2 miles north," Maggie said. "My daddy used it during Roundup. It's hidden in a draw hard to find if you don't know where to look." "Perfect. My men will set up there while I start making inquiries." Dawson tipped his hat. "Miss Colton, your daddy was a brave man. I intend to honor his sacrifice." The marshal mounted up and rode out with his deputies. Maggie watched them go, feeling something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Real hope, not the desperate kind that kept her going day to day, but the kind that came with the possibility of actual victory. "Don't celebrate yet." Caleb's voice pulled her back. She turned to find him checking his gun, his face grim. "The marshal seems capable," she said. "He is, but Creevy's been building his empire for 15 years. He's survived challenges before, survived investigations, survived rivals, survived everything the territory threw at him." Caleb holstered the gun. "Men like that don't go down easy, and they don't go down clean. You think he'll try something? I think he's already planning it." As if summoned by the words, Nettie Parsons came riding hard down the road. Her horse was lathered and her face was white with fear. "They took him," she shouted before she even reached the porch. "They took Pastor Oakes." Maggie felt her stomach drop. "What happened?" "He went to see Silas Wheeler, just like you asked, but Creevy's men were waiting. They grabbed him right off his horse and dragged him into town." Nettie was shaking. "They're saying he stole money from the church collection. They're gonna hold a trial tonight." "A trial?" Caleb's voice went hard. "Creevy's the only judge." "That's the point." Nettie's eyes filled with tears. "It's a trap. Creevy knows the pastor was here. He knows we're organizing. This is a message." Thomas stepped forward, his young face twisted with anger. "We gotta do something. We can't let them just take people." "What do you suggest?" Maggie asked. "We ride into town and get ourselves killed." "Maybe, if that's what it takes. It ain't what it takes." Caleb was thinking hard, his gray eyes distant. "Creevy wants a confrontation. He wants us to come charging in so he can claim self-defense. We need to be smarter." "The marshal," Maggie said. "We tell the marshal. Federal authority can override a local trial." "That's exactly what Creevy's counting on." Caleb shook his head. "He wants the marshal to reveal himself. The minute Dawson shows his badge in town, Creevy knows what he's dealing with. Then the evidence starts disappearing, witnesses start having accidents, and the whole case falls apart. So we just let the pastor hang. We find another way." The argument was interrupted by hoofbeats from the east. Everyone spun toward the sound, hands reaching for weapons. But the rider who appeared was alone, and when he got closer, Maggie recognized him. Tobias Lang. He stopped his horse at the edge of the property, his hands raised high. "Don't shoot. I came alone." Give me one reason not to put a bullet in you right now, Maggie said, her rifle leveled at his chest. Because I got information you need. Tobias did not lower his hands. About the pastor, about Creevy's real plan, about what's going to happen if you don't listen to me. Caleb moved to stand beside Maggie, his gun drawn. You're Creevy's man. Why would you help us? Because Creevy's gone too far. Tobias's voice cracked, just slightly. I done a lot of bad things for that man. Things I ain't proud of. But there's a line, and he's about to cross it. What line? Heights? He's planning to kill the pastor and blame it on you. Gonna say you hired men to break him out, and in the chaos, Oaks got shot. Then he'll use that as excuse to ride out here with the whole town behind him and finish this once and for all. The words hit like a punch to the gut. Maggie felt the blood drain from her face. Why should we believe you? Caleb demanded. You shouldn't. I've lied for Creevy 100 times. Tobias finally lowered his hands, slow and careful. But 3 years ago, I helped cover up the disappearance of a rancher named Whitley. Told myself he probably ran off, probably deserved what he got. His eyes flicked to Thomas. I knew different. I just didn't want to admit it. Thomas went rigid. You helped kill my father. I helped bury him. The admission hung raw in the air. In the canyon about 3 miles south of here, I can show you the spot. Thomas lunged forward, but Caleb caught him and held him back. The young man struggled and cursed, tears streaming down his face. Easy, Caleb said. Easy. This ain't the time. He killed my daddy, and he's gonna help us prove it. Caleb looked at Tobias with cold calculation. Ain't that right? You're gonna testify. You're gonna tell the marshal everything you know about Creevy's crimes. Tobias nodded slow. That's why I came. I'm done being afraid of that man. I'm done pretending I got any soul left to save if I keep doing what he asks. Maggie lowered her rifle, but her face stayed hard. And the pastor? How do we save him? The trial's set for sundown. Creevy's got him locked in the jail, but there's only 2 guards. Most of his men are out preparing for the raid on your ranch. Tobias pulled a key from his pocket. This opens the back door. You're giving us the key to the jail. I'm giving you a chance. What you do with it is up to you. Caleb took the key and turned it over in his hands. It could be another trap. It could be. Tobias met his eyes direct. But it ain't. I got a sister in California. After this is done, I'm riding west and never looking back. Don't matter if you trust me or not. What matters is whether you got the guts to take the risk. The silence stretched tight. Maggie looked at Caleb, and something passed between them without words. A decision. A shared understanding. Thomas, she said, ride to the line shack and tell Marshal Dawson everything. Tell him about the trial, about Tobias, about the body in the canyon. He needs to know what's happening. I want to help save the pastor. You will help, by getting the law on our side. Maggie's voice softened. Your daddy didn't die for nothing. Tonight we start proving that. Thomas struggled with himself, then nodded once and mounted his horse. He rode out hard, his figure shrinking against the horizon. Nettie stepped forward. What about me? Go back to town. Act normal. If anyone asks, you don't know nothing about nothing. Maggie gripped her arm. But when the shooting starts, get people off the streets. Women, children, anyone who might get caught in the crossfire. When the shooting starts. There's always shooting. Maggie's jaw set hard. Now go. Nettie rode out, and then there were 3. Maggie, Caleb, and the man who had helped bury Thomas Whitley's father. Tobias. Maggie's voice cut sharp. You're coming with us. If this is a trap, you die first. Fair enough. They saddled up and rode toward town as the sun began its descent toward the western hills. The heat of the day still pressed heavy, but a wind was rising, carrying dust, and the smell of something about to break. The jail sat at the edge of Brazos Bend, a squat building with thick walls and small windows. Caleb counted 2 guards at the front, just as Tobias had said. The back of the building faced an empty lot with a single door that most folks probably forgot existed. "Wait here," Caleb whispered to Maggie. "I'll go in alone." "Like hell. If something goes wrong, someone needs to get word to the marshal. If something goes wrong, we both need to be fighting." Her eyes burned into his. "I didn't come this far to hide while someone else takes risks for me." Caleb wanted to argue, but he saw something in her face that stopped him. Pride, determination, the refusal to be protected when she could protect herself. "Stay behind me," he said finally. "And if I tell you to run, you run. I don't take orders from you. Then consider it a strong suggestion." They moved through the shadows, Tobias in front with the key. The back door opened silent, and they slipped inside. The corridor smelled of sweat and iron. At the end, a single lantern burned beside a cell. Pastor Oakes sat on a wooden bench, his face bruised and his hands tied. When he saw them, his eyes went wide with disbelief. "Miss Colton, what are you doing here?" "Getting you out." She took the keys from Tobias and unlocked the cell. "Can you walk? I can run if I need to." The pastor stood wincing. "They hit me pretty hard, but nothing's broke." Caleb was watching the corridor, his gun drawn. "We need to move. Now." They made it 3 steps before the front door crashed open. Creevy's men poured in guns, raised faces hard. At their head stood Judge Harlan Creevy himself, his silver hair gleaming in the lamplight. "Did you really think I wouldn't know?" Creevy's smile was cold. "Tobias has been reporting to me every step of the way." Maggie spun toward Tobias, betrayal burning in her eyes. But the man looked just as shocked as she felt. "That ain't true," Tobias said. "I didn't tell him nothing." "You didn't have to." Creevy stepped forward. "I've known about your crisis of conscience for weeks. Did you think I'd trust a man who hesitated when I asked him to burn a barn? I've been watching you, Tobias, waiting for you to make your move." He gestured to his men. "Take them all." Hands grabbed Maggie from behind. She fought hard, but there were too many. Caleb dropped 2 men before they overwhelmed him, and Tobias went down swinging. Within minutes, all 4 of them were bound and kneeling in the jail, surrounded by armed men. Creevy walked along the line examining them, like cattle at auction. The pastor, the blacksmith, the trader, and the troublesome Miss Colton. He stopped in front of Maggie. "Your father caused me considerable annoyance before he died. I see the apple didn't fall far from the tree." "You killed him," Maggie spat. "You killed my father." "I did no such thing. William Colton died of natural causes witnessed by the town doctor." Creevy's smile widened. "The fact that certain stresses may have accelerated his decline is merely coincidence. You're a monster. I'm a businessman." He crouched down to meet her eyes. "And you're standing in the way of business. Your land sits on the largest water source in the territory. Do you have any idea what that's worth? What I could build with that resource? It ain't yours. It will be. By tomorrow morning, you and your friends will be dead killed while trying to escape custody. The town will mourn briefly, and then life will go on." He stood, as it always does. "You forgot something." Caleb's voice was rough but steady. "Federal marshal's already here. He's got your daddy's evidence, Miss Colton. Every crime you've committed for 15 years, documented and witnessed." Creevy's face flickered just for a moment. Then the mask returned. "A marshal, you say? I've dealt with marshals before." "Not like this one. He's got deputies. He's got jurisdiction. And by now, he's got a witness who can lead him straight to the body of Thomas Whitley's father." The room went silent. Creevy's men exchanged uncertain glances. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Caleb met his eyes without flinching. "Tobias told us everything. The canyon, the grave, the men who helped bury him. You think a federal investigation won't dig all that up?" Creevy's composure cracked. He grabbed Caleb by the collar and yanked him close. "Where is this marshal? Out of your reach. The punch came hard, snapping Caleb's head back. But when he looked up, he was smiling through bloody teeth. Hit me all you want. It won't change what's coming. Before Creevy could respond, a shout came from outside. Then gunfire. His men scrambled for the door and chaos erupted. Marshal Dawson had arrived. And he had not come alone. Bullets tore through the wooden walls. Creevy's men scattered, some running for cover, others returning fire through the windows. The judge himself dove behind a heavy desk, his face twisted with fury. Maggie rolled toward Caleb, her hands still bound behind her back. The knife, my boot. Caleb twisted his body, his fingers searching blind until they found the handle. He pulled it free and began sawing at her ropes. The blade slipped twice, drawing blood, but neither of them stopped. Hurry, she hissed. The ropes gave way. Maggie grabbed the knife and cut Caleb loose, then moved to Tobias and the pastor. Within seconds, all four were free. Stay down. Caleb pulled Maggie behind an overturned table as bullets splintered the wood above their heads. We need to get to the back door. Creevy, she said. We can't let him escape. The marshal's got men everywhere. He ain't going nowhere. But when Maggie looked toward the desk where Creevy had hidden, it was empty. A side door hung open, swinging in the chaos. He's running. She was on her feet before Caleb could stop her. She grabbed a fallen pistol and sprinted through the side door into the alley. Behind her, Caleb cursed and followed. Creevy was 50 yards ahead, moving fast for a man his age. He had a gun in his hand and desperation in his stride. Maggie raised her pistol and fired. The shot went wide, kicking up dirt at his heels. He spun and fired back. The bullet sang past her ear. Maggie, get down! Caleb tackled her sideways as another shot cracked the air where her head had been. They hit the ground hard, rolling behind a water trough. Are you crazy? Caleb demanded. You could have been killed. He's getting away. Let the marshal handle it. The marshal don't know what Creevy's done. I do. My father's dead because of that man, and I ain't letting him disappear into the night. She pushed up and ran again. Caleb followed because there was nothing else he could do. She was not going to stop. She was never going to stop. Creevy reached the livery stable and disappeared inside. Maggie slowed at the entrance, pressing her back against the wall. She could hear horses stamping chains, rattling, a voice cursing in the darkness. He's saddling a horse, she whispered. Then we go in fast. I'll take left, you take right. Caleb. She grabbed his arm. If something happens in there, nothing's gonna happen. If it does, her eyes held his in the dim light. Thank you. For everything. Something passed between them. Something neither had words for. Then Caleb nodded once, and they burst through the doors. The stable was chaos. Horses reared and screamed. Creevy was halfway mounted on a black stallion, one foot in the stirrup, when Maggie's bullet shattered the lantern beside his head. He fell backward, hitting the straw hard. The horse bolted, and suddenly Creevy was on the ground with two guns pointed at his chest. Don't move, Maggie said. You think this changes anything? Creevy scrambled back until his shoulders hit the wall. I have lawyers. I have friends in the territorial government. Whatever charges you bring, they'll disappear. Not this time. Caleb kept his gun steady. Federal jurisdiction. Your friends can't touch that. Every man has a price, even marshals. My father couldn't be bought. Maggie stepped closer, her voice shaking with rage. That's why you killed him. I didn't kill anyone. Your father was old and sick. Nature took its course. You poisoned his well. You burned his feed stores. You spread lies until no one would help him. You squeezed him until his heart gave out. Tears streamed down her face, but her hand did not waver. That's murder. Maybe not by law, but by God it's murder. Creevy's face changed. The mask of civilized power slipped, and underneath was something cold and ugly. Your father was a stubborn fool. I offered him more money than that dirt farm was worth. I offered him a comfortable retirement in California. He could have lived out his days in peace. Creevy's voice dropped low. But he wouldn't take the deal. He kept digging, kept asking questions, kept threatening to expose things that were none of his business. So yes, I made his life difficult. I made it very difficult. And when his heart finally gave out, I felt nothing but relief. That's a confession. It's a conversation between two people in a dark stable. Your word against mine. 3 people. Caleb stepped into the light. And unlike you, we don't lie. Before Creevy could respond, the stable doors crashed open. Marshal Dawson strode in with Thomas Whitley at his side and 4 deputies behind him. His eyes took in the scene with quick efficiency. "Judge Harlan Creevy," Dawson said formal, "you're under arrest for land fraud conspiracy and the murder of William Colton. You have the right to a fair trial, which is more than you ever gave your victims." "This is outrageous." Creevy tried to stand, but 2 deputies forced him back down. "I am the law in this territory." "Not anymore." Dawson pulled iron shackles from his belt. "Mr. Whitley here led us to a grave in the canyon. We found remains matching the description of his father. Combined with testimony from your man Tobias and the documents Miss Colton's father collected, we have enough evidence to hang you 3 times over." Creevy's face went gray. The confidence that had carried him for 15 years crumbled like dry earth. "I want a lawyer. You'll get one. In the territorial capital where you can't buy the judge." Dawson hauled him to his feet. "Move." They dragged Creevy out into the night. The gunfire had stopped and lanterns were appearing in windows all along the street. People emerged slow and careful, staring at the scene they had never expected to witness. The most powerful man in Brazos Bend in chains. Nettie Parsons was the first to approach. She looked at Creevy with eyes that held years of suppressed fury. "My husband died owing you money that didn't exist," she said quiet. "You took our ranch and left me with nothing but a boarding house and a broken heart." Creevy said nothing. More people gathered. The Hendersons, who had lost their farm to mysterious fires. The Walkers, whose son had disappeared after threatening to expose the judge's land schemes. Old Man Peterson, who had signed away his property while delirious with fever, witnessed by men who worked for Creevy. One by one they came forward. One by one they spoke their truth. Maggie watched from the edge of the crowd, exhausted and overwhelmed. Caleb stood beside her close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "It's over," he said quiet. "Is it?" She looked at the faces around her. All these people suffering for years. All this pain that could have been stopped if someone had stood up sooner. Someone did stand up. You. I didn't do it alone. No one does anything alone. That's the point. Caleb turned to face her. "Your daddy spent years gathering evidence because he knew he couldn't fight Creevy himself. The marshal came because your daddy reached out. Tobias flipped because he saw you refusing to break. Thomas found courage because you showed him it was possible. And you," Maggie's voice softened, "why did you stay?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried weight. 10 years ago, I watched someone I loved die because I followed orders instead of my heart. I spent every day since then running from that failure, telling myself I wasn't worthy of second chances." He met her eyes. "Then I saw you standing on that porch with a rifle in your hands and fire in your eyes, fighting the whole world alone. And something in me woke up." "What?" "The part that still believed doing the right thing matters, even when it costs everything." Maggie felt tears threatening again, but these were different. Not grief, not rage, something warmer. "I don't know how to trust people," she admitted. "Last man I trusted before you stole my heart and left me with nothing." "I know, and I ain't asking for your trust. I'm just asking for a chance to earn it." Before she could answer, Thomas Whitley approached. His face was streaked with tears and dirt, but his eyes held a peace that had not been there before. "They found him," he said, his voice cracking. "My daddy. They're gonna bring him home proper. Give him a burial with his name on the stone." Maggie pulled the young man into an embrace. He broke down against her shoulder, sobbing the grief he had carried alone for 3 years. "He'd be proud of you," she whispered. "Standing up like you did, taking that risk. I was scared the whole time." That's what courage is, being scared and doing it anyway. Pastor Oakes limped toward them, supported by Nettie. His face was battered, but his spirit seemed lifted. "Miss Colton," he said, "I owe you my life. If you hadn't come for me, if you hadn't come to warn us, we'd all be dead. We're even." The pastor shook his head. "We ain't even, but we're square." He looked at the gathered crowd. This town has a lot of healing to do, a lot of wrongs to make right. It's gonna take time. "We got time now," Maggie said. "That's more than we had yesterday." Dawson approached with a document in his hand. "Miss Colton, I need your signature on a few things. Testimony, property claims, evidence chain." He hesitated. "There's also the matter of compensation. The territorial government has a fund for victims of land fraud. Given what your family lost, you're entitled to a significant settlement. I don't want money. Maybe not. But your ranch needs rebuilding. Your neighbors need help. This money could do a lot of good in the right hands." Maggie looked at Caleb, then at Thomas, then at the faces of people who had suffered alongside her. "Use it to help everyone Creevy hurt. Every family that lost land, every person who lost someone. Split it fair. That's not how it works. The claim is yours. Then I'm giving it away. Put it in a trust. Let the community decide how to spend it." She straightened her shoulders. "My daddy didn't fight for money. He fought for justice. This is how I honor that." Dawson studied her with new respect. "You're something else, Miss Colton. I'm my father's daughter. That's enough." The night stretched on as the town slowly came back to life. Creevy was locked in the same jail cell where he had planned to execute his enemies. His men were scattered, some arrested, some fled into the darkness. The bank he had controlled was sealed pending federal investigation. Maggie found herself standing alone outside the general store, looking at the door that had been slammed in her face just days ago. Mr. Harmon appeared in the doorway, his face pale with shame. "Miss Colton." He could not meet her eyes. "I heard what happened. I wanted to say, I'm sorry for turning you away, for being too scared to do what was right. You had a family to protect. That ain't an excuse. Your daddy had a daughter to protect, and he never stopped fighting." Harmon finally looked up. "I got no right to ask for forgiveness. But I want you to know, if you ever need anything from this store, it's yours, no charge, for as long as I'm breathing." Maggie considered him for a long moment. She could hold the grudge. She had earned that right. But holding grudges was heavy work, and she was tired of carrying weight that did not serve her. "I'll pay fair price," she said, "same as anyone else, but I appreciate the sentiment." Harmon nodded, relief washing over his face. "Thank you, ma'am." She walked on, passing through the town that had once turned its back on her. People nodded as she went. Some reached out to touch her arm, to whisper words of thanks or admiration. The woman who had been rejected was now something else entirely. A symbol, a proof that fighting back was possible. She found Caleb waiting at the edge of town, holding the reins of both their horses. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east, and the first birds were starting their morning songs. "You should get some rest," he said. "So should you." "I ain't tired. Neither am I." She took her horse's reins and swung up into the saddle. "Ride with me." They headed back toward the ranch as the sun began to rise. The heat would come later, but for now, the air was cool and clean. Maggie breathed deep, feeling something release in her chest. "What happens now?" Caleb asked. "I rebuild. The barn, the fences, the herd. Everything Creevy destroyed." "That's a lot of work for one person." "I ain't one person anymore." She looked at him sideways. "Unless you're planning to move on to the next town." Caleb was quiet for a moment. "I've been moving for 10 years. Town to town, job to job, never staying long enough to put down roots. He reined his horse to a stop. I'm tired of running, Maggie. It was the first time he had used her given name. The sound of it on his lips made her heart stutter. What are you saying? I'm saying, if you'll have me, I'd like to stay, help you rebuild, see what grows. He paused. Not asking for anything you ain't ready to give, just asking for the chance to be here. Maggie stopped her horse beside his. They faced each other in the growing light, two people carrying wounds that would never fully heal, but choosing to heal together anyway. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Trusting someone, letting them in. Every time I've tried, it's ended in pain. I know, me too. Caleb reached out slow and took her hand. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the people who understand pain are the only ones who can really help carry it. She looked at their joined hands. His were rough and scarred, same as hers. Working hands, survivor's hands. Stay, she said finally, but don't expect it to be easy. Miss Colton, if I wanted easy, I would have left the first time you pointed a rifle at my chest. For the first time since her father died, Maggie laughed, really laughed. The sound surprised her, rising up from somewhere deep and washing away something dark. They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence. When they reached the ranch, the sun was fully up, painting everything in shades of gold and green. The burned barn looked less like a wound and more like a beginning. Thomas was already there unloading lumber from a wagon. Nettie had come with food and supplies. Pastor Oaks was organizing volunteers from town who had come to help with the rebuilding. The community that had turned away was now turning back. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Because watching one woman stand alone had reminded them what standing together looked like. Maggie dismounted and walked toward her home. On the porch, she paused and looked back at the gathered people. Workers, neighbors, strangers who were becoming friends. My daddy used to say that land don't mean nothing without people to share it with, she called out. Today, I finally understand what he meant. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. And for the first time in months, the house did not feel empty. It felt like the beginning of something new. 3 weeks passed like water over stones. The barn rose from its ashes, beam by beam, nail by nail. Every morning brought new faces to the Colton Ranch neighbors, who had once looked away now showing up with tools and willing hands. Maggie worked harder than any of them, refusing to stand idle, while others labored on her behalf. Caleb stayed close, matching her pace without trying to surpass it. They moved together, like two parts of a single machine, anticipating each other's needs before words were spoken. Thomas Whitley had become a permanent fixture on the property. After burying his father proper, he had nowhere else to go and no desire to leave. Maggie gave him a room in the house and work that filled his days with purpose instead of grief. You don't have to stay, she told him one evening. You could start fresh somewhere else. California, maybe. Somewhere without memories. Memories ain't the problem, Miss Colton. Thomas hammered a fence post into the hard earth. Running from them is. I learned that watching you. Pastor Oaks came by every Sunday to hold services under the cottonwood trees. The congregation grew each week as people from surrounding ranches heard about what had happened in Brazos Bend. They came to worship, but they also came to see the woman who had stood against tyranny and won. Maggie found the attention uncomfortable. She had not fought for glory or recognition. She had fought because there was no other choice. You're a symbol now, Caleb told her after another group of visitors had come and gone. Whether you like it or not. I ain't no symbol. I'm just a rancher trying to rebuild. That's exactly why they admire you. You ain't trying to be anything except what you are. The words stayed with her through the long summer days. She thought about her father, about the quiet strength he had carried without fanfare. He had never sought attention either. He had simply done what needed doing and trusted that the rest would follow. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. Marshal Dawson returned at the end of July with news that spread through the territory like wildfire. Harlan Creevy had been tried in the territorial capital and found guilty on all counts. The sentence was death by hanging to be carried out at month's end. Maggie received the news in silence. She had expected relief, maybe even satisfaction. Instead, she felt hollow. "I thought I'd be happy," she admitted to Caleb that night. "I thought knowing he'd pay for what he'd done would make things right." Does anything ever make things right? No, I reckon not. She stared at her hands. My daddy's still dead. Thomas's daddy's still dead. All those families still lost everything. Creevy dying don't bring none of that back. No, it don't. Caleb sat down beside her. But it stops him from hurting anyone else. That counts for something. Does it? It has to. Otherwise, what's the point of fighting at all? Maggie leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. They had not spoken about what was growing between them, but it was there, undeniable. Every accidental touch, every shared glance, every moment of understanding that passed without words. "I'm scared," she said quiet. "Of what?" "Of this. Of you. Of letting myself feel something again." She pulled back to look at him. "Every person I've loved has left me. My mama when I was young. My daddy 3 months ago. The man I thought I'd marry turned out to be a liar and a thief. I ain't going nowhere." That's what they all said. Caleb took her hand in both of his. "I can't promise you forever. Nobody can. But I can promise you right now, today, tomorrow, every day I wake up and choose to be here. That ain't much certainty. It's all anyone's got." He met her eyes steady. "The question is whether it's enough." Maggie did not answer, but she did not pull her hand away either. The days moved on. August arrived with relentless heat, baking the land, until even the shade offered little relief. The barn was finished now, standing proud against the sky. The herd was rebuilding new cattle purchased with the settlement money Maggie had redirected to help the community. Nettie Parsons had used her share to expand the boarding house into a proper hotel. Pastor Oakes had rebuilt the church roof that Creevy had let rot for years. The Hendersons had returned to their land and planted their first crop since being driven out. Brazos Bend was healing. Slowly, imperfectly, but healing. Then the letter arrived. Maggie found it in the mail delivery from town, a cream-colored envelope with elegant handwriting she did not recognize. The return address was San Francisco, California. "What is it?" Caleb asked, seeing her expression. "I don't know." She opened it careful and began to read. Her face changed with every line cycling through confusion, then shock, then something close to rage. "Maggie, it's from my mother." The words fell like stones into still water. Caleb stared at her. "Your mother, I thought. She died when I was 7. That's what my daddy told me. That's what I believed my whole life." Maggie's hand trembled. "But according to this letter, she didn't die. She left. Ran off with another man to California and never looked back. Maybe it's a lie, someone trying to upset you. There's details in here that no stranger could know. The name of my childhood dog, the color of the quilt on my bed, the song my daddy used to sing when he rocked me to sleep." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "This is real. My mother is alive and she wants to see me." Caleb took the letter and read it himself. The words were careful, almost pleading. A woman named Sarah explaining that she had been young and foolish, that she had regretted leaving every day since that she had followed news of the Creevy trial, and finally found the courage to reach out. "What are you gonna do?" he asked. "I don't know." Maggie wiped her face roughly. "Part of me wants to burn this letter and pretend it never came. Another part wants to ride to California and scream at her until I run out of breath. And the rest wants to understand." Her voice cracked. "Why she left. Why my daddy lied. Why I spent 20 years thinking I was an orphan when my mother was out there the whole time." The revelation shook something loose in Maggie's foundation. For days, she moved through her work distracted, turning the letter over in her mind like a stone she could not stop touching. Thomas noticed the change first. You okay, Miss Colton? You ain't been yourself lately. Got some things on my mind. Anything I can help with? No, this is something I gotta figure out on my own. But she could not figure it out. The anger and grief tangled together until she could not separate them. Her father had lied to her for 20 years. The man she had idolized, whose memory she had fought to honor, had looked her in the eyes and told her that her mother was dead. Why? She rode out to his grave one afternoon, leaving Caleb and the workers behind. The headstone was simple, just his name, and dates the way he would have wanted it. You lied to me, she said to the silent earth. All those years you lied, and I don't understand why. The wind moved through the grass, but no answer came. Was it to protect me? To protect yourself? Were you ashamed? Her voice broke. I would have understood. I would have forgiven her eventually. But you took that choice away from me, and now I don't know what to feel about anything. She sat there until the sun began to sink, wrestling with a grief that had suddenly become complicated. Her father was still the man who had taught her to ride and read and fight for what was right. But he was also the man who had hidden the truth about her own mother. Both things could be true. Both things were true. Caleb found her as the first stars appeared. He did not speak, just sat down beside her and waited. I'm gonna write her back, Maggie said finally. You sure? No. But I need answers. I need to know why she left and why my daddy covered it up. Otherwise, this is gonna eat at me until there's nothing left. You want company? I could ride with you to California. It ain't your burden to carry. Maybe not. Caleb looked at her in the fading light. But I'd like to carry it anyway, if you'll let me. Maggie felt something shift in her chest. For so long she had insisted on bearing everything alone. It was safer that way. Less chance of disappointment, less chance of betrayal. But alone was also exhausting. And Caleb had proven himself over and over these past weeks. He had stayed when others would have run. He had stood beside her without trying to stand in front of her. Okay, she said. We'll go together, after the harvest. After things are settled here. Okay? They rode back to the ranch under a sky thick with stars. The house was lit up warm. Thomas and Nettie visible through the windows preparing supper. It looked like a home. It felt like one, too. Maggie stopped her horse at the gate and took it all in. 6 months ago I had nothing, she said quiet. No family, no friends, no hope. Just a dying father and a piece of land that everyone wanted to take from me. And now I got more than I know what to do with. She looked at Caleb. Including you. I ain't something you got, Miss Colton. I'm something you chose. Same thing. No, it ain't, not even close. She considered his words. Choosing was different from having. Choosing meant deciding every day to keep what you had. Choosing meant the thing you held could walk away if you stopped earning its presence. I choose you, she said, in case that wasn't clear. Caleb's face broke into a rare smile. It wasn't actually. You ain't exactly forthcoming with your feelings. I'm working on it. Take your time. He reached over and took her hand. I ain't going nowhere. They dismounted and walked into the house together. Thomas looked up from the stove with flour on his hands and relief on his face. Finally, I was about to send a search party. We're fine, Maggie said. Just had some thinking to do. Nettie set plates on the table and gestured for everyone to sit. The meal was simple but filling, and the conversation flowed easy. Outside, the summer night wrapped around the house like a blanket. After supper, Maggie stepped onto the porch alone. She breathed deep-smelling earth and grass and the faint sweetness of wildflowers. Her father's land. Her land now. She thought about everything that had led to this moment. The rejection at the store, the burned barn, the nights of fear and the days of fighting, the discovery that her mother was alive and her father had lied. All of it somehow had brought her here. To this porch, this life, these people. Maybe that was how it worked. Maybe pain and joy were not opposites, but partners, each one making the other possible. You could not know the value of light until you had lived in darkness. Caleb joined her after a while, standing close but not touching. "What are you thinking about?" "Endings," she said. "And beginnings. And how sometimes they're the same thing." "That's awful philosophical for a cattle rancher." "I contain multitudes." He laughed soft. "Yes, you do." Silence settled between them. The kind of silence that does not need filling. The kind that two people can share when they have said everything important and are simply being together. "I want to build something here," Maggie said finally. "Not just a ranch. A place where people who got nowhere else to go can find their footing. Like Thomas did. Like Nettie did. A community. More than that, a promise. That this land will always welcome folks who are willing to work and willing to fight for what's right." Caleb nodded slow. "Your daddy would have liked that." "I hope so." She turned to face him. "I hope he's somewhere watching and proud of what we're doing, despite everything. Despite the lie about your mother. Despite all of it. He wasn't perfect. None of us are. But he spent his whole life trying to do right by this land and the people on it. That's got to count for something." The night deepened around them. Inside, Thomas and Nettie were cleaning up, their voices carrying through the open window. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, and another answered. "Caleb?" "Yeah. Thank you." Maggie's voice was steady. "For seeing me when everyone else looked away. For staying when you could have walked. For believing I was worth fighting for when I wasn't sure myself. You're worth fighting for." He turned to face her fully. "You always were. You just needed someone to remind you." She stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat of him, close enough to see the scars he carried inside and out. "I'm done running from this," she said. "From you. From whatever this is becoming." "Good." His hand came up to cup her face. "Because I'm done pretending I don't feel what I feel." He kissed her then. Soft at first, then deeper. The kind of kiss that holds years of loneliness and loss, and the first tender shoots of hope growing through the wreckage. When they finally pulled apart, Maggie was crying. But these tears were different. These tears were relief. "I love you." She said the words coming easier than she expected. "I don't know when it happened, but I do. I love you too." Caleb pressed his forehead against hers. "Have for a while now. We're both pretty bad at saying things. We'll get better." The door opened behind them, and Thomas stuck his head out. "Not to interrupt whatever this is, but there's a rider coming up the road. Fast." They separated quick and moved to the porch rail. A horse was indeed approaching, silhouetted against the moonlit road. As it drew closer, Maggie recognized the rider. Marshall Dawson. He pulled up hard and dismounted before the horse had fully stopped. His face was grim. "Miss Colton, Mr. Hensley, I got news." "What kind of news?" "Creevy's dead." Maggie stared at him. "The hanging wasn't scheduled until next week." "Wasn't the hanging that killed him?" Dawson removed his hat. "He was found this morning in his cell. Poison. Smuggled in somehow. We're still investigating." "Poison?" Caleb frowned. "Who would—" "My best guess. He did it himself. Had help from someone on the outside getting the stuff in, but the choice was his." Dawson shook his head. "Couldn't face the rope, I reckon. Wanted to go on his own terms." Maggie felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief, no anger, just emptiness. "It's over," she said. "Really over." "Yes, ma'am. For what it's worth, every piece of land he stole is being returned to its rightful owners. Every family he hurt is getting compensation. His empire is being dismantled piece by piece." "Good." Dawson put his hat back on. I also wanted to tell you something else. Something personal. What's that? I've been a marshal for 23 years. I've seen a lot of people stand up to a lot of bad men. Most of them had guns and badges and backup. He met her eyes direct. You had a rifle, a stranger, and more guts than anyone I've ever met. This territory owes you a debt it can't repay. I don't want anything owed. I know. That's why I said it. He tipped his hat. Take care of yourself, Miss Colton. You've earned some peace. He rode out into the night, and the four of them stood on the porch watching until he disappeared. It really is over, Thomas said quiet. This chapter is, Maggie corrected. There's always more story to write. She looked at the people around her. Thomas, who had found purpose in labor and belonging. Nettie, who had found courage in community. Caleb, who had found redemption in standing up instead of standing by. And herself, Maggie Colton, who had found that strength was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. The summer heat would break soon. Autumn would come with its harvest and its changes. Then winter. Then spring. The cycle would continue as it always had, as it always would. But now, she would face it with people beside her, not because she needed them to survive, but because surviving alone was not the same as living. Let's go inside, she said. We got a lot of work tomorrow. They filed into the house, and Maggie paused at the door for one last look at the land her father had loved and died defending. The land she had fought for and bled for, and nearly lost everything to keep. It was still here. She was still here. And that was the only ending that mattered. Maggie Colton closed the door behind her and stepped into the warmth of her home, surrounded by the family she had built from the ashes of everything she had lost, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new chances to prove that one person standing firm could change the world.